Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Making Milestones podcast. I'm Shelby Dennis of Milestone Equestrian, and this is my podcast. I feel like I say this like almost every episode, and that's no exaggeration, but long time, no podcast. This is not the most conventional podcast. I don't upload regularly. I hope to one day maybe get to the point where I can do that, where like I'm preemptively recording podcast episodes and like queuing them. But I've not gotten to that point in my life yet. So thank you to everyone who stuck around despite that. It means an awful lot to me. And I'm sorry for how long it has taken me to post this episode. I have been moving, so this episode is going to be kind of a life update and just to talk about moving and like how that came about and all that jazz, and just like a little update episode, if you will. So anyways, myself and all 6 of my horses, which would be Milo, Banksy, Harlow, Mesa, Pogo, and Juniper, we all moved this past month. Fortunately for me, which made the move a lot easier than what it could have been, but that does not mean it's easy. I hate moving. I hate moving so much. My clients whose place I moved to, they allowed me to continue like moving through over the course of like a month. So it wasn't a situation where it was like September 1st rolls around and you have to get everything out on that day, because that like literally would not have been possible. For those of you who haven't moved with horses or like moving an entire farm, it takes moving to like a next level. It's like the Olympics of moving. You think moving your own stuff in the house is hard? Try taking down horse shelters, fencing, all of their feed equipment, all of the storage for their feed, all of like literally every single item you could possibly imagine using for your horses, which if you board your horse, times that several times over, because we're talking like literally all the equipment for them to live, which if you board, usually that's outsourced from the boarding facility, right? So needless to say, it was a little bit of a shit show. It was a very busy month of like end of July to August, because basically what happened is like I had my brother and my nephews and then my dad, so like, and my grandma within the span of like a 2-week period, all visiting in July. So like mid-July to end of July was that. We kind of knew that we were going to be like committing to the move around mid-July-ish. So we'd started kind of putting stuff in action for that. But since I had family staying, it was kind of put on hold during the time that family was visiting and just kind of doing stuff with family. And then as soon as everyone left, it was like, okay, everybody, let's haul ass and get this move on the road. So anyways, everything is over at the new property now, but I still have some shelters to set up for the horses. I have 2 more shelters that I want to get up. I have to get like their hay feeders fully set up. So right now they have like part of their track and 1 shelter and then like a couple of hay stations set up. And then the rest of the hay stations that I have are just hanging their nets along the track, which isn't going to be ideal come winter because it'll get rained on. So I have to get more hay stations in action as quickly as I can. But it's been busy. So I'm finally hitting the point where I can settle down a little bit and start to relax into the new home, but there's still a lot of stuff to do. So it's very stressful, and that's kind of taken a toll on my mental health and also just like overall physical capacity, because moving and doing like all the aspects of moving, like while having to run my own business and do all like the packing and shipping for product orders, going to clients, running my Facebook and Instagram pages, doing all the emails. It's just so horrible, like for one person to be doing. And like, I can't in good faith just like hire out to do that, especially for someone that I want to have do it as like a full-time job, because I'm not comfortable hiring any workers that I can't like basically guarantee a position for the foreseeable future. And right now, I don't really feel like I can do that, because I'm just in a weird space where I'm kind of centering my whole business and just like figuring out like what I'm going to be doing and what I want to outsource help for, and like the extent to which I can do that for someone. And I don't want to take on an employee where it's like you're giving them their livelihood, but you can't guarantee that for the foreseeable future, and make it so it's mutually beneficial where I have enough hours to give them that they can like make a living off of, and it's also beneficial to me. So that's been hard. So a lot of the help that I do hire out for is just like contract work where it's like, okay, like I need help on this specific day, or can you come? Which is still really helpful, but it also means that like it's less consistent. And I do feel like I'm at a stage where I do need a little bit more consistency, but figuring that out from a business perspective is hard because it's just not something I've really had to do. And delegating tasks is really hard. And also, to be quite honest, like in the past where I have had people help, where I've had like assistants and people helping me with the horse training, it hasn't always gone well. There's been situations where I've been taken advantage of, and it's really hard too, because my personal preference is working with people that I already have developed some form of relationship with, and like having like a friendship with employees, which I'm sure like actual business people would tell you is a stupid thing to do. But I also have an issue with the way a lot of like real, I'm putting that in quotations. You can't see me, but I'm doing like finger quotes. Real business people conduct their businesses, because I think that the impersonal nature of like the boss to employee relationship leads to employees being taken advantage of a lot of times, and just being viewed as like a number, especially when it's like a really big corporation. I have a big issue with like big corporations and how they function and run things. I have an issue with capitalism as a societal structure, which I've talked about at length, and I'm going to try really hard to not go off on a tangent about that. Technically, I am incorporated, so I'm a corporation, but like it is just me working here, you know, like other than the occasional contract work that I do. And when I do that, I really make it like my job to pay people fairly. And again, like I'm not a billionaire. I'm not even a millionaire. Nowhere freaking close to it. Wish I was a millionaire in some ways, because I could do more charitable work and I could actually afford a freaking house. But again, that's for another time. Maybe later in this podcast, but not right now. But I wish I was. I'm not. I'm just like a single person. But even still, I want to pay people well above minimum wage. One second. I have to look up what the minimum wage here is in BC now, because I don't pay it. Like that makes me sound like I'm paying less than that. That's not the case. I'm paying like well over it. Okay, so the minimum wage here is $17.40 per hour, which is honestly insane. To Americans, you're probably listening to that and being like, wow, that sounds so great. But no, like the cost of living in most areas of BC is so high that like on $17 an hour, like I literally don't know how you could pay rent, much less buy food. So like it's unethical, in my opinion, to pay someone minimum wage, whether they're doing physical labor or not, because some of the stuff I'm hiring out for, like a lot of it is not really physical labor. It's not really outsourcing help with the horses until fairly recently. It's like packing packages, helping with administrative tasks, and just like helping me organize and like clean the house. And like with the move stuff, it was a little bit more physical labor that I'd be hiring out for, but like not a ton, because I do most of the physical labor, which I need to stop doing, because I'm going to end up hurting my body with how hard I push it sometimes. But anyways, minimum wage is $17.40 an hour. You cannot provide for yourself on that in most locations in BC. So what I have been paying people is $22.50 an hour, which you'll notice is $5 above minimum wage. So the way I see it is, it's like I look at these big corporations like grocery stores like Loblaws and the fact that they're starting people out on minimum wage, and I'm like, what the fuck? Honestly, what the fuck? If me, a measly little small business owner who is still figuring out how to do business and still trying to figure out how to afford the cost of living here and afford what I'm doing and like get ahead, if I can figure out a way to pay people more than minimum wage, why cannot these multi-billion-dollar companies do it? And to answer your question, they absolutely can, but the CEOs of those companies have decided it's more important for them to have like 80,000 houses and super yachts and all this stupid bullshit than it is to like allow their employees to eat. That is going off on a capitalistic tangent, trying to stay away from that. I kind of lost my train of thought here. I don't know where I was going with this, but basically, yeah, I need to start hiring out help. And like the ability to do so would have been exponentially easier during the move if I could hire out a lot of hands to help. I still did hire people, and I had a lot of amazing friends come through to help me get stuff done, and like family members and stuff as well. And my mom and the fella that I'm seeing, which I'm not going to elaborate further on at this time, because I've made the mistake of getting way too excited about relationships too early on and then feeling really fucking stupid after, when I'm like, oh, well, like, yeah, they were not nice, but so far, so good. But yeah, that's kind of why I'm laying a little bit more low. And I'm trying to be in my era of life where I'm like not committing to an end goal, kind of like what I do with when I'm training horses, which I know like men aren't horses, people that you date aren't horses, people that you have relationships with, be they platonic or romantic, aren't horses. But what I mean by that is not clinging to an end goal where it's like desperately being like, I want XYZ in the end, like I want to get married, buy a house, find my soulmate, whatever, and like committing to that as the end goal and kind of trying to shove a person into the box of like what I want long term, and just like being like living day by day and just being like, I'm enjoying what I'm learning from this person, the time we spent together, and like what they bring to my life right now, and like let's just see how it goes. And like on either side, like if they decided they didn't want to be with me anymore, as much as that would suck, it would be devastating and heartbreaking. But ultimately, it's like on either side, it's like both people in a relationship deserve to be with someone that wants to be with them long term and that is choosing to be there because that's the person that they want. And whether or not that changes a few months from now or years down the road or whatever, even if you've gotten married and you're like tied or together or you have kids or whatever, if it changes down the road, I want to try to live my life where there's fluidity in my expectations of people and like the role that they play in my life, where like if you're romantically involved with someone and they're like you're in a relationship with them and whatnot, that could shift to being like a friendship and they still brought value to your life in what they've brought to the table, and not having it be where it's just like so much beginning and ends, if that makes sense. Like I understand that beginning and ends are like a unavoidable aspect of life, but like the way I'm trying to live it is just being like happy with what people bring to my life regardless of how long that lasts or like what the end goal is, if that makes sense. Because I've been so committed to like the end goal and like the way that I want things to be that oftentimes it's like I fall in love with the idea of something and then it ends up causing problems in the relationship, or it leads to me staying for longer than I perhaps should have, which is a recurring theme in my relationships. But anyways, that's why I'm choosing to not talk about it as much or be like as much of a keener as I have been in the past. Keener is like a Canadian slang. So like people might be like, LOL, what do you mean? It's just like to be keen about something, you know, a keener. And yeah, so that's kind of why I've been more hush-hush about that. And it's kind of the same thing with the move too. Like I did a lot of posting to my Patreon about like the process of like taking down certain things and like setting up stuff at the new place. And I've let patrons in on that a little bit more because it's a smaller group of people and it's like less like people to answer to if something goes not the way that I want it to. So they've kind of gotten to see behind the scenes. So if you're interested in seeing stuff like that, you can subscribe for as little as $1 a month and get to see behind the scenes and participate in monthly Q&As and whatnot. So they've gotten to see more of the process of things. But basically, like, I'm going through what I would consider a transitional period of my life. And honestly, like, I feel like I've said that a lot on the podcast. So you guys are probably like, wow, like the last 2 years of your life has been such a transitional period. It's like, yeah, they have. Okay, they have. This whole section of life, and maybe we're gonna push it to 3 or 4 years. Who freaking knows? You know, like it's a transitional period of my life. Maybe my whole life is just gonna be a freaking transitional period. And I mean, if we wanted to get really deep, we could probably argue that for everyone, because like every day that we're living, we're just like getting closer to the ultimate transition, which would be death. But that's pretty morbid and may not be what people want to hear in a podcast that is just supposed to be about me moving. But this is the way the ADHD brain works. So if you're making the mistake of listening to the podcast of someone who has ADHD, buckle up, bucko. The other thing too that I guess is new for me is that I've been off my ADHD medication for like 2 months now, which like we can leave it up to the individual as to whether or not they think it's a good idea. There's like pros and cons of being medicated on ADHD. I'm kind of just trialing this to see how it goes, to see how much the medication helps and like whether the pros and cons outweigh the problems with it. Because I think my problem with ADHD meds is that I forget to take them often, which is like honestly what led to me not being on them, because I forgot to take them for a few days during the moving process at first. And then like once it hit like a week, once you've been off of them that long, you're supposed to like get a lower dose and slowly like work your way back up to your other dose. And I was kind of like, I don't really feel like doing that, because when you go off of them and back on, it often makes you feel like nauseous because of the fact that you're taking like amphetamines. Like I'm on Vyvanse. It's not like I'm not taking meth. Like people joke and call it diet meth because technically it's an amphetamine. Like I'm pretty sure Vyvanse is dexamphetamine, I think is Adderall, but it ends in amphetamine, I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that. I am not a doctor, but I think it does from what I recall from the prescription label. So it can make you really nauseous, and it also tends to impact your sleep and give you like a bunch of anxiety when you take it after being off of it for a while. So there's like this period of time where you're going to feel like super shitty, even if in the end it does actually help your productivity and overall quality of life. And I was like, I don't really need to go through that period during a move where there's already a lot of stress going on, and just know that I'm going to feel jittery and that I'm going to be eating less and sleeping less during a time where I need to be doing all of these things. So anyways, that's the story of why I've been off my meds. If people have been noticing it impact my productivity, don't tell me, because, you know, there's a lot going on right now that could be impacting it that's outside of the condition that I have, okay? I'll figure it out. So that's like another change too in life, where I'm just kind of like seeing how it goes. And yeah, not like, you know, committing to like the process and like the ups and downs and like the valleys and peaks of life, and just like seeing how things go, and being less like bent on like what the destination I want. Cause like I still have goals. This isn't to say that it's like throw all your goals out, guys, and just commit to anarchy. That's not what I'm saying. However, like I have my goals, and I've trying to become less fixated on like the path to get there, and just like accept that like this is what I believe I'm destined for. This is what I really want. These are my dreams. And regardless of whether or not the path is one that I can construct and see in my head and plan out, like I'll accept any deviations or forks in the road and still follow the path to the end goal. So that's what I'm committing to in like every aspect of my life, is just to like have the dreams and have the goals that I want, but not be set on like what the path there looks like, and just be open to the process happening however it should. Because like, for example, tomorrow it's like I could freaking have someone just hand me $1 million on the side of the street. Obviously that's not realistic, but like, let's say it happened. That would completely shift the trajectory of my life and like the current pathways to my goals that I have kind of like drawn up as a rough draft. So there can be things that shift your life in like a very positive way and bring immense change, or like the inverse of that in a very negative way, where suddenly you have roadblocks that weren't there before. And honestly, that's what I've largely grown used to, which is I think why I've had such a tendency in the past to try to plan the outcome of things and just like try to control everything, even though you can't. It's because of having these like sudden roadblocks and like bad things happen that have impacted my life heavily and like brought a lot of trauma and stuff. So I've been trying to control things too much because of that. And I'm trying to do the opposite of that now, and just like accept the way things are, and accept the fact that like regardless of the outcome of something, that like I can survive and be resilient and continue pushing through those things. So with this move, like the move wasn't planned from the standpoint of like, if you asked me back in like even June if I would be moving this year, I would say no. No, I highly doubt it unless something incredible comes up. Like I hate moving. I don't want to move. Things are good enough as they are. But I did get the opportunity to move, and initially I was like hesitant and like really looking into it to see if it would work out and weighing out the pros and cons. I decided that it was worth the jump to move and to make these changes in my life. And so far it's going so good, but it is a big shift. But like the bonuses are that like the horses are on a track system now, so they have a lot more dry areas than what a field would offer them, because they only had a few hard packed areas in their field, and it was like a lot of open space. And I did strip grazing and track systems on that area, but in the wintertime, it was a lot harder to keep things dry. So now, hopefully, like I'm not entering winter or the really wet season here yet. So this will be like, we'll have to see how it goes. But it should most certainly be better than how it was at the old old place for the horses. The use of the arena is also a big deal because it makes it easier to do more structured riding with my horses, especially through the wet seasons when the weather's not favorable, because before I was just riding them either like out in their field or in the trails in the back area, all of which would get really wet and muddy during the winter. I didn't have as much undercover storage, like for a feed room or a heated tack room or anything like that, which made it really hard. Like if you ride in the winter weather, your tack is going to get wet. And then if you don't have like a warm, dry area to bring it, it damages it. So like then I would be having to keep tack in the house and like cart it down to the horses. The road down to the horses, which is almost a kilometer long, in the winter time at the old place, when it gets really wet, the road would wash out, and then my landlord didn't want us to drive on it because it would damage the road, which was fair. But then that means that like when you're bringing tack down, you're having to push a wheelbarrow all the way down. And also for like bringing hay and stuff down, it was like you have to buy all your hay for the winter all at once and store it, or if there's not enough room for all of it, then you have to cart it down. And then also when the pipes froze, I'd have to cart down water in my truck, which I was allowed to drive the truck down, especially after it freezes. But there's just like all these little challenges that just made things a lot harder, and it just made it so that like throughout the winter and stuff, it's like most of the care that I'm doing for the horses is just about like doing what's necessary to take care of them, and after that there is very little energy to actually want to do stuff with them, just because it was just such a hassle. And like the storage of stuff was like undercover for like their feed areas and stuff, but there's just like challenges. Like I had a Shelter Logic like tarp shelter, and a tree branch went through it during a windstorm and it completely destroyed the tarps. And then we had to put new tarps on them and they kept blowing off. And when you're trying to do all these things when the weather's already terrible and you're not getting any dry days, it's just like honestly the worst. You're like always soaking wet and muddy and damp, and it's just, it sucks. So the more access to like undercover areas and stuff is going to be a pretty big shift that should make my life quite a bit easier. So I'm looking forward to that. The house is also a lot nicer. Like the kitchen's super nice. I have an island. I have a way more counter space. So that's pretty exciting. And it's just like a really cute, like wooden, like cabin style pan abode house, which I like. It also has a wood burning fireplace, which is pretty sweet. So all of that stuff is really cool. Pretty awesome. So yeah, it should be a nice shift. And then like basically where I'm at now in life is like I do not want to move until I'm like buying my own place. Like that is the goal. I hope that that happens sooner than later, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen in like the immediately near future, like within the next year, unless something really, really shifts for me. But I really don't want to have to do another big move like this with all of the horses unless it's to a place where I'm planning to like really put roots down and stay for life, because like I am just so tired of shifting my life around every few years. Like I feel like a potted plant where I can never like sink roots into the soil and really grow and like build the life that I want long term, because I know that like everything's subject to change where I live. Like it's not that like I don't own the property. I'm at the mercy of someone else ultimately if they want to like sell the property or whatever, right? And I'm really tired of that. So in moving, what I have tried to do is like at this house right away after moving, I've made more of an effort to put like art up on the walls and to do more little things to make it my own, even if it's not going to be like a super, super long term, as in like living here a decade plus type thing. Because in the past, I haven't really done that because I just really haven't seen the point in doing it, despite the fact that it does make things happier for the time you're there. And it doesn't really add that much work in taking things down and moving them. But it's just not something that I've done. So I've been trying to make more of an effort to do that and to just set things up the way that I like them, to make them like usable and like nice, while accepting the fact that it might not be like a permanent thing, because that's something that I just haven't really done. So anyways, that's like what I've been trying to do with this move, and that's differently than the last couple of moves that I've had. And I mean, like every move that I've had these last few years has been an upgrade in a way, because I've been like living on property with my horses for almost 6 years now, which was like a long-term goal of mine. And it's been something I've been doing for 6 years now. And it's like worked out to find a place that works for me to keep the horses and move for like these last few moves. And that's been really great because like I can't imagine boarding them again. And that's something that I very much don't want to do, which is also partly why it's like I do not want to move again until I'm like buying a place. I really hope that I get to the point in life where I can buy a place because I have like a lot of ideas that I can't put into action until I own my own place. And like long term, there's stuff that like while renting is great, especially when you have really good landlords who are really helpful and do all these amazing things, there's stuff that I can't personalize or do to the extent that I would like to until like I'm the one that's managing and owning the property. And that's like my lifelong goal is to just be able to build and like set up a property to my own parameters and just have something that's just mine. And it might sound silly to people who don't get it, but like it's just like, I mean, I grew up playing Sims and being able to like build and customize houses to my liking and all that jazz. So like that's essentially what I would ideally like to do one day. And I know that it's going to be very expensive and that like property's expensive and things aren't really going in my favor generationally in terms of like what my generation is up against for affordability and like getting property. But that is very much my goal, is to be able to do something like that and just like build something beautiful. But until then, what I'm trying to do is just like enjoy the little things, like going for walks with my dog and like enjoying the forest and just like being amongst like nature that's so much older and wiser than I am myself. And that kind of takes me out of my body a little bit. And it makes me really happy. So that's something I want to do more. I want to go on more road trips in the future. I want to take the horses out on cool rides and eventually get to the point where I can like pack out with them and like camp with the horses in really cool remote areas that are harder to get to on foot. I would really love to do that. And I want to do like lots of road trips. Like I really want to go to like Haida Gwaii, which is an island here in British Columbia that's way up north on the north coast, and do a trip over there, and then also do a trip all the way up to like the Yukon and Alaska. I also really want to do trips down south and go down through Washington, Oregon, and California and like go down to Yosemite. I really want to visit like Wyoming and Utah and Montana and just kind of travel a lot of the Pacific Northwest mountains and just kind of see the world and just like be really involved in nature and just get to see cool things and experience things that I haven't yet or that I have but would like to experience more of, because I just think road trips are really cool. And like my heart is especially like in the mountains and like the Pacific Northwest, and I just want to see more of it because it's like very much the environment that like makes my heart happy. And I've been to like other places further east and whatnot, and like I still need to do more traveling, but the more I have traveled away from like my home base, just the more I becoming aware of how much I love it here. And of course, like I could still travel more than I do. Road trips are the most accessible overall, personally, for me. So like I don't do as much like flying around and doing things. However, that's something that I do want to do and just like see more places and go for shorter trips. But it is very hard to leave when you have animals and whatnot. And like with road trips, I can bring my dog with me, or they're like usually just shorter lived trips anyways. But I do want to do big road trips where I'm covering like a lot of ground and seeing like a lot of cool little places, just because road trips are so fun. So you can just pull over and stop and check out cool areas. Whereas like if you're flying somewhere, you can't just go ask the pilot to pull over the plane and like touch down on a cool area that you saw while flying over. So it's just very different. So yeah, those are my plans for the future. And that's kind of what's been going up with like what's been going on with me the last little while, is like the move has consumed a lot of my time. I do feel like I lost a portion of my summer and like had to forego some of my summer plans because of the move, which is just part of life. But there are things that I wanted to do, like cool rides that I really wanted to go on with the horses, and just like I wanted to work with the horses more through the summer months when the weather's really nice. And I didn't get to do all of that, and now we're heading into winter and the days are getting shorter and it's getting darker earlier, which is a little bit sad. But I do really love September and October as months, and I love like the weather until it gets really dark. And then like November, December, January, February, I find to be quite depressing months, like especially leading up to like the winter solstice because it's just so dark. And then after the solstice, it kind of just feels like a weight is lifted off of your shoulders because every day after that is getting a little bit brighter. And then you're like entering the new year and there's lots to look forward to. So that's hard. Like I think that November and December especially are going to be hard months for me. But I'm hoping it'll at least be better just because the setup for the horses here is a lot more user friendly for me as a human. And it just makes things easier where I'm not having to trek down a kilometer to the horses in the dark, in the rain and the snow. So that should be easier. And I'm looking forward to that. But I do feel like I did miss out on some stuff that would have been enjoyable to do over the summer because of like the stress of how crazy everything was. Because on top of the move, like I had the move and like then the family visiting all at the same time. And then it was like I had a few weeks of relative calm. But then I had a clinic that I flew out to Ohio for, like right smack dab during the move, like August 29th to September 1st. And then like right after that, I was back for I think 3 or 4 days and I had my friend's bachelorette party. And then I was back again for like a little bit and just had like some more things to settle into and like complete for like the move. And now it's like the longest time I feel like I've actually been back and staying home for like the last like month or two. So it's been a really hectic summer and I'm really ready to just kind of start laying low, but there's still so much stuff that needs to get done with the move. So once I get more settled and like everything's actually getting properly set up and like things are getting more chill, it's going to be a lot nicer. But I just can't, like, I'm concerned about getting everything that I need done before winter, like, and like the really wet, gross weather that makes things harder before all that hits. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to just settling in and hopefully just getting closer to some of my longer term goals and just like adjusting to my new life and seeing how things go. But it's been really tiring. So like all of that stuff, it's like I just have not wanted to make content or podcasts or like filming stuff just because it's been a freaking ride. But we're almost out on the other end now. So yeah, thank you for bearing with me. But hopefully this will also mean that I have like more regular content through the winter, especially just because I'll be able to do more. And I've already been doing more with my horses since they've been here, especially after the initial adjustment period of them just like hanging out and chilling and like doing their own thing. And while I finished up moving everything. So yeah, that's kind of what the way things have been going. And if you have any questions or anything, check out my Patreon to join in on the monthly Q&As because I'm playing catch up on a lot of stuff on there too. But there's still like a library full of like learning videos and whatnot as well. So that's like one of the best ways that you can support my content and kind of help push me towards the end goal dreams that I have is just by supporting me on Patreon or even just by liking and supporting the podcast or my videos or sharing any of my posts and stuff. Like all of that stuff helps. But Patreon's one of the more direct ways that you can help support the podcast, even just with like $1 a month. It all helps, especially the more people that do it. It's a great way to support like my free content that I put out. If you don't really want to have access to the training videos, if you do the base level tier, it just helps with supporting the free content and it's like $1 a month. So super helpful. But yeah. So anyways, I guess this is going to be a shorter podcast because I just wanted to do like a quick update. I also wanted to thank everyone who's listened to this podcast because I recently got a notification that I've hit 100,000 downloads of the podcast, which is crazy. That's insane. That's not even just like the amount of people who've listened to it. It's the people who've actually downloaded the podcast onto their phones or their computers. So that's wild. So thank you so much for supporting the podcast because starting this out like with just me talking and like being as infrequent and kind of all over the place as this podcast has been, it's not something that I really expected like to take off in the way that it has. And like it's still like a small podcast if you compare it to like other people's, but it's wild. And like my pages in general, it's been crazy to see like how much social media has like played an integral role in helping me get to where I am today and like helping me gain the traction that I needed to climb out of some pretty difficult situations and like overcome a lot of obstacles that have been put in my way along the way. And it's just been really cool to see. So I'm really appreciative of that and like the support that everyone gives me. Cause like even with the move and stuff, like the support that I get from like friends that I've made and like people online and stuff, it just helps make things that are hard feel less difficult. So I really appreciate that. So thank you to everyone who's listened to this. If you're interested in ways to support the podcast and the other work that I do, please check out the links in the podcast description where I will link my shop page where I sell horse bridles and equestrian apparel. All of my 2023 apparel is on massive clearance discounts. The discontinued bridle styles, because we've done some updates to improve the leather quality on certain bridles. And there's some overstock sales as well. So there's certain bridles that are also significantly discounted. And I've also released some newer styles of bridles that I have done, like the multi-bridle, the Milo bitless bridle, and so on. There's newer styles available of those ones now that are very nice and that I highly recommend checking out. And all of that stuff just helps me continue doing what I do. I also have my website where I have webinars available for purchase, and that's milestoneequestrian.ca. And you can head to the shop part of that page and look at the webinars that I've recorded. And also check out like my YouTube channel because I'm going to be trying to post there more too. And that's like a passive income for me where if videos really take off and people are watching them and commenting on them and helping with the algorithm, that's something that could be life-changing for me. And I know it sounds like silly and insignificant. Apparently I can't speak. It sounds silly and insignificant because you think that like by liking or commenting on a YouTube video or even like on the podcast, like liking or commenting or reviewing it or subscribing to Patreon for $1, for example, all these things to the people doing them, they probably don't realize the difference that they make, but like it is so helpful for helping boost my content in the algorithm and helping me get like ad revenue from YouTube, for example, and just like providing me with further opportunities for like sponsorships or working with people who could really help me to shift gears and get to where a lot of my end goals are. Because I would say for a lot of my long-term goals, one of the biggest hurdles that I see right now is being able to make enough money to get to the point where like certain things are in reach. And it's not about like buying things for myself that are nice or like treating myself to the lap of luxury. It's like practical things where if my end goal is to eventually have a property where I can run like a really effective behavior modification program for horses out of, the money to do that is astronomical. And like the money to get to that point is very difficult. So everything helps. Even continuing to help push my content out there. It's going to help me with my book release that will be coming up in the new year and whatnot because I'm writing another book. I do also already have a book released called The Other Side of Horsemanship, which is another way you can support me. It's available at most of the places you can buy books, but there's also a link on my main website that lists off a bunch of locations that you can buy it. So yeah, like everything helps. Even the little stuff that you think is no big, it really, really helps. And like, it's just like, yeah, I really appreciate everyone who does that stuff. So anyways, I'm pretty tired. I might have a nap today, honestly, because I'm not feeling super great today. Every now and then, like the exhaustion of like just how much stuff I've been having to do, the stuff I've been stressing about just hits me. And then I'm just like, I need to like tap out of life for a second and just take like a rest day. Because yeah, catching up on everything that I've missed out on and just being like stressed about like the emails that I have yet to go through and stuff during the move was like very taxing. So still working my way through doing all of that. And I appreciate everyone's patience and understanding with that because I think sometimes it's hard because most of the people have been very good, but I think that sometimes people forget that like behind small businesses, there are like actual people or like a person that is like struggling with day-to-day life stuff. And sometimes people can be not the kindest, but overall, like I'd say overwhelmingly so, people have been really nice and patient and understanding. So as a whole, people have been great. But yeah, it's just something important to recognize is like when you're getting annoyed with like not getting fast enough responses from people, keep in mind that like small businesses, like there's people who are out like parenting their kids, taking their kids to school, dealing with traumas, moving and doing all these other things in addition to managing their business. And sometimes when stuff gets overwhelming, it's just not possible for one person to stay perfectly on top of everything. So anyways, the level of understanding that I have received has been really great and I'm super appreciative. So anyways, thank you for tuning in to this little update this little update podcast. I almost said video, not a video. I really appreciate it, and I hope that this update wasn't super boring. And I also always appreciate people like sending in what they think about the podcast, like any perspectives they have, like sending in their topics, suggestions, and so on and so forth. All of that is so incredibly appreciated and helpful. So thank you again. I appreciate each and every one of you, and like all of you have contributed to changing my life and like helping me chase down some of the dreams, some of which I've now achieved, but I still have lots that I'm going after. So anyways, thanks for listening to my little life update. I hope everyone's doing well, and I hope that you enjoy the weekend and this little podcast update. So thanks for listening to the Making Milestones podcast. Don't forget to check the links down in the description below to see how you can support the existence of the podcast and also where else you can find me. So thank you, everyone, and bye.